Ken, what are you hearing from people inside the DOJ right now about what this Gates pick would mean for the future of the department?
They are absolutely horrified, Anna, and that's not an exaggeration. And they're not speaking by name.
They're not speaking. Everybody's anonymous in the city of Washington because they might be sent to a gulag, you know, with the new fascism, the rise of Hitler and all that stuff. It's tough in Washington these days. Bop, 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 bop. Matt Gaetz has made the left angry before. It's the news media's job to destroy all Republicans. If Jesus came to earth and he were a Republican, you know, incarnate in the flesh, I think the Democrats would be in charge of crucifixion in no time at all. The news media is back at they're dredging up old Matt Gaetz stuff because he said something years ago that made the left angry. In 2022, 2 years ago now, Congressman Matt Gaetz made a comment about the pro-abortion protesters in Washington, D.C. And the news media naturally asked him about it because he said something unflattering about pro-abortion protesters. They love abortion so much. And he made a comment, so the news media was all over it, and NBC Fake News and all the news media, they were all over a comment that Congressman Matt Gaetz made in 2022, about 2 years ago, after yet another giant, yay, we love abortion march and rally, which the Democrats are good at. And it was funny. I think normal people laughed out loud, especially if you've ever been to any of these marches. And I and my best girl and I have been to so many of these protests and marches. It's our free street theater in Washington, D.C., so we do a lot of these rallies and marches, and we typically go incognito, which is not an island in the Caribbean. But here's Matt Gaetz 2 years ago when asked about a comment that he had made about the pro-abortion marchers in Washington, D.C., in particular the women in the pro-abortion march.
Is it safe to say that based off of your comments, you're suggesting that these women at these abortion rallies are ugly and overweight?
Yes.
What do you say to people who think that those comments are offensive?
Be offended.
Now, we need more of that in Washington, D.C., and not less of that. And honestly, if any Democrat were saying that about any Republican gathering, the news media would applaud and cheer and laugh and have a good time and high five. So great stuff. And this is making news all over the world again, even though it's 2 years old, because the Democrats want to resuscitate all of this. Today, it's a big story in India today. The publication known as India Today has the headline, Ugly Overweight. Old reply of Trump cabinet pick on abortion protesters viral. It's viral. Isn't it interesting that the term is viral and the party of so many different viruses, and they like monkeypox these days. So Matt Gaetz, Trump's pick as the next attorney general, stoked a controversy in 2022 by calling abortion rights protesters ugly and overweight. An old video of Gaetz doubling down on his remarks has now gone viral. This, again, from India Today. It's big news all over the world. Now, Democrats, please, are you kidding me? The rhetoric that they use all the time. I'm sorry, didn't you call half the country fascists and Nazis about 10 minutes ago? That wasn't 2 years ago. And if you've ever been to one of these pro-abortion marches, well, let me just say that Matt Gaetz has apparently been to at least one pro-abortion march. That's the thing. And the news media, they're all over this story like, oh, no, he said something funny and true 2 years ago. And we're against things that are funny, and we're against things that are true. And that's a fact check when it comes to the Democrats. The Economic Times has the same story. They've got it all over the place. The Democrats, they just light the fuse, and it's everywhere. Who's Matt Gaetz, Trump's new attorney general who once called abortion activists ugly and overweight, faces sex trafficking, past tense, sex trafficking probe. Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you guys wave your pal Harvey Weinstein over here, please? Because, you guys and maybe Bill Clinton can join with Harvey Weinstein, and we got to have Anthony Weiner come in with the teenage online sexual thing and the pictures and all that stuff. And we'd invite Jeffrey Epstein because he's one of your big buddies, and you all flew on his plane to his private island for the underage everything. And that's okay, because Pound Me Too, let's not forget Pound Me Too. Isn't that amazing? Headlines everywhere, local news agencies across the country. Ugly, overweight, old reply of Trump's attorney general pick on abortion protesters, now under scrutiny. Matt Gaetz, AG bid, is a slap in the face for American women. No, I don't think that's true. I think Doug Emhoff is a slap in the face for American women. He's the second gentleman, and they wanted him to be the first gentleman, the first gentleman of the United States. And he famously, according to multiple witnesses, slapped his girlfriend of the moment while, ironically, they're at the Harvey Weinstein party at the Cannes Film Festival in France when Doug Emhoff, the husband of Kamala Harris, slapped the woman so hard that she went spinning away from him. And there's all kinds of testimony and reporting on it, but the news media just drops that because 2 years ago, Matt Gaetz said that the pro-abortion protesters at one of the rallies in Washington were ugly and overweight. Now, let's go to the videotape, as they used to say, because if you look at the videotape of the protest, you might see that Matt Gaetz has a point there. But the news media won't do that, will they? No, they won't. All right, let's get to some more audio here, Michael. So much to get to because the attacks on Matt Gaetz, and this is just today. Tomorrow they'll shift it to Pete Hegseth. And again, remember with Pete Hegseth that they told us Minnesota Governor Tim Walz was a proud U.S. Army combat vet, Iraq war. He wasn't. He didn't go to Iraq. He's never been to Iraq. Never mind that. Certainly not in uniform. I think maybe amazing stuff. Who was it that went on a congressional delegation, part of a congressional delegation, and I wasn't in Iraq in uniform. I was there with on a congressional delegation. But never mind that. They lie about everything, these people. All right, let's go to soundbite number 5. CNN, they have their legal guy, Ellie Honig, which is not a good name. Ellie is not a good name for a man. I think that's like, I don't know, one of the women in the Andy Griffith show in Mayberry, I think, isn't it? But Ellie Honig. Honig isn't a good name either. And they brought him on and they, hey, you want to come on? We're going to attack Matt Gaetz for a couple of hours, Congressman Matt Gaetz, who was exonerated by the Justice Department after years of political investigation and targeting. And Ellie Honig was brought on to say this.
Matt Gaetz is aggressively unqualified for this position. He's never been a prosecutor. He's never really practiced law at any big-time level. He has no idea what it means to stand up in a court and to represent the United States and to try to take away someone's liberty. I mean, look, there is only one agency, only one body of the federal government that can deprive a person of their liberty, and that's the Justice Department. And that's why, to me, it's an offensive pick.
Well, the U.S. military kills people if you think that qualifies as taking away your liberty. And they're out there saying, oh, no, Donald Trump's going to deploy the U.S. military to kill American citizens, which they made up in a drug-induced haze. And they've repeated it so many times that half of them actually think it's true now, even though they made it up. And speaking of depriving people of their liberty, you guys tried to deprive Matt Gaetz of his liberty when the Biden-Harris Justice Department investigated him for 2 years and then said, never mind, there's nothing here. There will be no charges. The investigation will end today because there's nothing to say about this. And that was an effort to deprive him of his liberties. President Trump, you're trying still to deprive him of his liberties. And he was convicted of, 34 felony counts for a non-disclosure agreement. A non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels, who got $130,000. right? And you guys lie about everything. The value of Mar-a-Lago is something you lied about, while you were trying to claim that he misrepresented the real estate values of his many properties. You guys were actively misrepresenting the real estate values of his many properties so that you could try to imprison him, which is what banana republics do. And you guys just 9 and 10 days ago were saying Trump's going to use the Justice Department against his political enemies. Once again, see the Russian playbook and Victoria Nuland. Whatever they accuse you of is what they are actively doing in the moment. And they see this as a defensive measure, downfield blocking, by saying Trump's going to use the Justice Department against his political enemies. First of all, a bunch of you deserve to be prosecuted for crimes inside the Justice Department for abusing power, inside the FBI for abusing power. And you guys put, honestly, Naval Academy grad George Papadopoulos was put in jail for what again? They couldn't even explain. And what was done with the 34 felony counts? It's the money came from this bucket instead of that bucket. And, 34 felony convictions. And all they wanted was to be able to say, Donald Trump, comma, convicted felon, comma, and then go on. So they abused the hell out of their power in order to achieve that talking point. They put Steve Bannon in jail. He was just released from jail. Senior Trump White House advisor. Peter Navarro, Trump White House advisor, dare I say a senior advisor, for saying, listen, we have executive privilege when it comes to being called before Congress to testify. And that's more than, for example, Hunter Biden can claim, although he ignored his congressional testimony and no Justice Department effort to put him in jail. You guys are trying to put your political enemies in jail, and you've put several of them in jail already, you pigs. And then there are the January 6th convictions, honestly, where they attacked the White House for 3 days through M80s, which are big firecrackers. They're eighth of a stick of dynamite, will blow your hand clean off. Throwing those at the police. They injured 160 to 180 police. Their attack on the White House that lasted for 3 days forced the Secret Service to evacuate President Trump and his family to the underground bunker, which was designed for a nuclear attack, because the Democrat mob was outside attacking the White House. Nobody got a day in jail for that. Nobody was sentenced to so much as a day in jail for a 3-day siege of the White House. They set the Church of the Presidents on fire. Didn't catch anybody. Tried to tear down another mob, tried to tear down the statue in the middle of Lafayette Park of Andrew Jackson, and nobody got a day in jail for that. Never mind that. And here's Ellie Honig. Well, he did practice law with a law firm in Florida, and then he served in the State House in Florida. But these guys, biggest liars in the world. Ellie Honig on CNN. Terrell, he's so terrible. He can't be attorney general. They can take away your liberties. Yeah, you guys have been doing it for quite some time, targeting your political enemies and putting them in prison like the third world banana republic tree swingers that you are.
When you're talking about the Attorney General of the United States, this person is in charge of 110,000 employees, 94 U.S. attorneys' offices, the entire FBI, the entire DEA, the entire ATF, the Solicitor General, who handles all the Supreme Court litigation for the government, the U.S. Marshals, the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
This is a man who he certainly couldn't be hired as an assistant United States attorney in any major district. He probably couldn't be hired as a paralegal. He probably wouldn't even pass a background check.
Now, he should be sued for slander, and he doesn't believe any of that to be true. He obviously is a lawyer. He worked for a law firm in Florida. He served in the State House in Florida. His father served in the State House in Florida as well, and on and on. But they just smear you. They slander you. You know, Ellie Honig, should I just make up a bunch of slurs and slanders about Ellie Honig? Since this is the game they play, these are the rules that they apply, but they apply to them and not to anybody else. Have you noticed that? I'm telling you, these people. Could the fate of America's children be tied to our fate? Well, much like all the abortionists across America and the lives of helpless unborn babies, the left seems determined to snuff out everything. Preborn, wonderful organization Preborn, stands as a beacon of light and hope for the most defenseless among us. Preborn babies, Everyday Preborn's network of clinics, helps to rescue, on average, more than 200 unborn babies. while surrounding the expectant mothers with love and with God and offering free ultrasounds. Now, witnessing the miracle of life growing inside of you, never been more crucial. We navigate through this time of moral decline and decay. Will you please join Preborn in their effort to help protect the least among us? For just $28, you can sponsor an ultrasound and give the mother a chance at choosing life, not only for her baby, but for herself. An ultrasound typically doubles a baby's chance of living a long, happy, and prosperous life. To donate securely, all you have to do is dial pound 250 and say the word baby. That's pound 250 and the word is baby. Or you go to preborn.com/plant. That's preborn.com/PLANTE. Yes, sir. Yeah, the smears, the attacks, the news media, the Democrats, the slanders, the prosecution and persecution of their political enemies. And then they have the temerity and the mendacity to say, Trump in the future is going to use the Justice Department against his political enemies. Turnabout their would-be fair play, but you people need to be banished just for your hypocrisy. Those rascally Democrats, aren't they crazy? Yes, they are. They're a lynch mob. They have a long history of being a lynch mob. Let's go to the telephones, Michael. Let's go to Frank calling from Chicago, Illinois, home of the great WLS. Frank, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, Chris. How's it going? I've
Pretty
called
good.
before.
Great, Frank.
I've heard you this week. I haven't had a chance to call you guys, but this week, a couple of times you said you called out Obama, and you keep saying his middle name, Hussein, because I know you're trying to trigger your audience and all that by calling him by his middle name, because I've yet heard you even call Donald Trump by his middle name. So obviously there's something you try to do there, but I get it. My point is,
I think the mention today was in relation to funding Iran, and I was talking about the Shah of Iran and the son of the Shah of Iran, who I met with yesterday, and I was talking about Barack Hussein Obama funding tens of billions to Iran, right?
Correct, but then you've done it numerous times in the past.
Okay.
For some reason, you keep saying Hussein, and you accentuate on the word Hussein.
Well, it's his name, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, John Fitzgerald Kennedy,
No, but when you talk about Trump, I don't even know what his middle name is. Is it John?
John, yeah, Donald John Trump. Yeah, and I've used it many times. Yeah, you ran out the clock on yourself. Now, Frank, calling from the greater Chicagoland metropolitan area, saying, yeah, you say Hussein when you talk about Barack Hussein Obama. Well, presidents, we have Lyndon Baines Johnson, LBJ, John F. Kennedy as John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Presidents and assassins tend to get three names, interestingly enough. I've talked about James Earl Carter many times, now 100 years old. He's the one who gave Iran to the Ayatollahs instead of backing the Shah, which he should have done. But I refer to him as James Earl Carter because it rhymes with James Earl Ray, And Lee Harvey Oswald. We got James Earl Ray because you both get... I call Hillary Clinton Hillary Diane Rodham Clinton fairly frequently. And I say Joseph Robinette Biden. I say Joseph Robinette Biden frequently as well because his middle name is Robinette, and it's funny. That's the thing about his middle name. So that's, Frank. But some people just want to be offended by everything, and I'm offended by funding Iran, the Islamic Revolution, which... they then use the money to attack civilization, and it's being funded by the Democrat Party, and I don't think that's a good idea. And it's not a coincidence, perhaps, that his middle name is Hussein. He did go to that church in Chicago. The Trinity United Church of Christ, and the Reverend Jeremiah Wright. He hated the Jews. He was ahead of the curve on hating the Jews. Barack Obama's religious leader Jeremiah Wright. He hated the Jews. He said the Jews wouldn't let Barack Obama meet with him once he was elected to the White House. All right? And speaking of which, the Washington Post today in the Metro sectional, they've got a story on D.C. City Councilman Trayon White, who thinks that the Rothschild family, Jewish finance family, banking family in Europe, that they control the weather and make it snow. And he's also on trial or about to be on trial for taking bribes. But the Washington Post has a fun front page of the Metro sectional on him.
D.C. keep talking about we're a resilient city, and that's a model based off the Rothschilds controlling the climate to create natural disasters. They can pay for it and own the cities, man. Be careful.
That's right. Be very careful. D.C. Council member Trayon White Sr. said Wednesday that he expects his council colleagues to respect the will of the voters who reelected him to a third term last week and not remove him from office while charges are pending in his criminal bribery case. But when you're a Democrat, all that is fine, and the Washington Post is fine with that, too. They're going to back Trayon White, who thinks that the Jews control the weather and make it snow because Democrats are different. Front page of the Washington Post today, Trump tests clout with surprise picks. And there's a color photograph here on the front page of Joseph Robinette Biden shaking the hand of Donald John Trump in the Oval Office with a rousing fire, a big fire behind him. And also, if you know what's going on back there, they got a portrait of Abraham Lincoln, who was shot in the head and killed. And then a bust of Martin Luther King, who was shot in the head and killed. And over on the right, he's got a bust of Bobby Kennedy, the senior, who was shot in the head and killed. He's got a lot of shooting in the head, political assassinations there. Amazing stuff. And by the way, Martin Luther King was shot and killed by a Democrat Party presidential campaign volunteer. Just saying. John F. Kennedy shot and killed by a communist or the deep state. You choose. Amazing stuff. But, Frank, you should pay attention to the bigger picture. Listen along. I use a lot of middle names when I'm often mocking politicians. James Earl Ray, Lee Harvey Oswald. Come on. Crying out loud. And also, good luck finding the news, because academia and the news media, they hide a lot of stuff from the public. And, the fact that the man that shot and killed Martin Luther King was a Democrat Party presidential campaign volunteer. George Wallace's campaign, a Democrat governor, a Democrat racist, a Democrat segregationist. He didn't want his kids going to school in a racial jungle either, just like Joe Biden. All right? See how that goes? Your Democrat Party. It's amazing. They get to just clean their own records. They're in charge of scrubbing their own history, their own records. Just amazing stuff. And you can read about James Earl Ray all day long, and you'll never see, oh, wait a minute, he was campaigning in California for Democrat Governor George Wallace, who was running for the Democrat nomination. He later became an independent when he didn't get the Democrat nominee, but never mind that. It's good to be a Democrat. Yes, sir. The George Wallace presidential campaign. James Earl Ray, Democrat. Another racist Democrat shot and killed Martin Luther King. And I'm not sure if I've told this story, actually, but I only found out a couple of years ago. My stepfather, who I called Dad as a child, Bill Plant, was a CBS News reporter. He had covered Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge with Martin Luther King and all that good stuff. And when Martin Luther King was shot and killed by a Democrat campaign volunteer in Memphis, Tennessee, the Lorraine Hotel and all that, my best girl and I have been there. But my stepfather was dispatched down to Memphis upon the assassination, and he was invited by the coroner back into the room where Martin Luther King's body laid on the slab to witness the body. And he never told me that story until just just about 3 years ago, I think. Told me this story. Oh, yeah, I went back and was there after the assassination, witnessed the gruesome, grisly reality of what the Democrat campaign volunteer had done to Martin Luther King. But it's amazing how they've scrubbed that from their own history. Maybe it's not amazing, but it's appalling. All right, now let's go to, because there are so many things. So many things. Let's go to number 14, cringe, right? Cringe. Oh, wait, because Charlemagne the God, we were just talking about all that stuff, too. And Charlemagne, let's go to Charlemagne the misspelled God, because this is actually more fun. Yesterday, and this is right here on the front page of the Washington Post, too, with Trump tests clout with surprise pics and the photograph of Donald John Trump with Joseph Robinette Biden in the Oval Office. Oval Office does not have a middle name. And the big fire going back there, the biggest fire anybody's ever seen in a fireplace in the White House, at least since the War of 1812 when the British came to Washington in 1814. But they're shaking hands, and they had this. And we played the audio of them yesterday, this bizarre where let's play the Joe Biden, because Joe Biden, it's only 45 seconds, I think, and Joe Biden and Joseph Robinette Biden, Donald John Trump sitting in the Oval Office. But wait, you've been saying that this guy's a threat to democracy, Donald Trump, and you've been calling everybody fascists and Hitler and Nazis and stuff. Now you're sitting down shaking hands like your old friends, like it's Joseph Robinette Biden and James Earl Ray hanging out together. Yeah, racial jungle, don't want that. But this is what the exchange in the Oval Office yesterday.
Well, Mr. President-elect and former President,
thank you.
Donald, congratulations.
Mr. President-elect and former President.
Looking forward to having like we said,
congratulations.
Smooth transition.
Looking forward.
Hopefully we can make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So
good.
Welcome
thank you
back.
very much. And thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Joe.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you all.
Then they kicked out all the press. It was about a 45-second photo op, and then they screamed and yelled, and they kicked all the press out of the Oval Office, and that was it. And honestly, and I was saying yesterday, we played that yesterday, moments after it happened, and said, well, wait a minute. I thought he was supposed to be a threat to democracy and Hitler, and he's the end of civilization, and he's got to be stopped at all costs. And now you guys are smiling and yucking it up and having a good time. And how does that make sense? Even Charlemagne the misspelled God asked about that this morning on his whatever. I think it's a podcast or something. And he said, well, wait a minute. You guys were telling us just 9 days ago that this man must be stopped because he's a threat to democracy. It'll be the end of everything. You're already shooting at him. He's already been grazed by one assassin's bullet, another gunman hiding in the bushes with a Chinese rifle and everything. And now everything's like, oh, hey, welcome to the White House. Gosh, welcome back. Smooth transition. Congratulations, Mr. What he calls him, Mr. President-elect and Mr. Former President. You dimwit. What a nitwit this man is. But Charlemagne the misspelled God this morning.
I just don't understand the White House visit. Now, granted, I'm glad it's a peaceful transition of power, but what happened to the threat of democracy talk? What happened to the fascist talk? By the way, I know I've said those things about Trump as well, but I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about his political opponents like President Biden. When they say it, it holds way more weight than me. I'm just trying to figure out, how do you go from he's an existential threat to democracy to welcome back?
He was happy, too. He was happy. He was smiling. He was grinning. He was cheesing.
I think that the word that Charlemagne the misspelled God was looking for was existential. Would that be correct? The existential threat, a threat to the very existence of the United States of America. But you can phrase it any way you'd like, certainly. So there it is. Is he Hitler? Is this Charlemagne the misspelled God guy? Is he Hitler? I mean, the Democrats, but he's right about this. What happened? It seems like just hours ago that they were a threat to democracy, and now it's, hey, welcome to the Oval. Hey, we're going to have a great transition from me to you. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? It's our media and the Democrat Party, which are inseparable from one another. Extraordinary stuff. Yes, it is. All right, now let's go to cringe. I mean, it's just, and the media dominance of the left, where the lie lives on forever and ever. And they, Matt Gaetz, child sex trafficking or something. No, that was an abuse of power by the Justice Department that was dropped. And the only important part of that is that was dropped. Know what I'm saying? But here's cringe being asked by a reporter, and honestly, I don't recognize the reporter, but I wish I did because it was a perfectly good and legitimate question. There was a meeting in the Oval Office with Donald John Trump, and I'm going to do it all for the rest of the day, and Joseph Robinette Biden, and he welcomed him like he was an old friend, but he was just calling him a Nazi and Hitler and a threat to democracy days ago.
Was there an apology today?
I'm sorry?
Was there an apology from President Biden for the words, some of the words used?
An apology from the President Biden.
To President-elect Trump for some of the words that was used on the campaign trail.
Look.
Words that was
used.
And
I've answered this a couple of times about a threat to democracy in the past week. The President is going to always feel obligated to be honest with the American people.
Uh-huh.
What he says still stands.
So he just warmly welcomed a threat to democracy into the Oval Office and the White House with a hearty handshake and this laurel, honestly. And that's Cringe's response. Now, on CNN, they decided to go to town on this, too, because that terrible reporter asked a question because it seems incongruous that the man you're calling a threat to democracy a week ago is now being warmly welcomed with a smile and a handshake and a peaceful transition of power. So, one must be false and one must be true. They cannot live in harmony. They're in conflict with one another. And at CNN, they have a guy, Scott Jennings, who I think he said he's interested in being White House press secretary, and he might be very good. Alina Habba has said no thank you. The attorney, a very lovely woman, has said no thank you to the suggestion that she should become White House press secretary. But Scott Jennings, the one Republican voice on CNN, had this to say after they're talking about what happened in the White House and the meeting in the Oval Office and then the exchange in the White House press room.
I'm shocked. I mean, did you ever think you'd see literal Hitler in the Oval Office with the President of the United States? I mean, you know what I see in all
Scott,
this?
that's not, Biden
Democrats
didn't say that literally.
It was the underpinning of the Democratic campaign that Donald Trump is a fascist. And what I see in this, I'm glad it's happening, but what it tells me and what it ought to tell Democrats is they didn't mean any of it. It was all campaign rhetoric.
It was all fake. It was all a lie. And good for Scott Jennings. So wait a minute. He just warmly welcomed this threat to democracy, this fascist, this reincarnation of Hitler into the Oval Office. And he was calling him these horrible names. And Scott Jennings is absolutely correct that this just proves that everything they say is a lie. They lie to you constantly. And when they tell you that he's a threat to democracy, they know that that's a falsehood. That he's a fascist, they know that that's a falsehood. They behave like fascists so frequently. They use the Justice Department against their political enemies. They raid homes using the FBI, the homes of their political enemies, and on and on and on. And Scott Jennings is right that the whole thing was a fraud, a sham. And the fake anchor, the fanker at CNN, who was not hired for her journalistic chops, she's like, he never literally said that. Let's go to the videotape. Honestly, let's roll all the video of you guys saying all this stuff. And now you're acting like it was never said or it wasn't serious or something. Our news media, the most corrupt institution in the United States of America. We should have a news media czar. Since that, honestly, I could be the news media czar. I could do that. What does that job pay? I need to look into that. Crazy stuff. Means it was all a lie. Scott Jennings told the truth. The stammering CNN anchor. Oh, you know it was. No, I know what it was, and you're pretending that it wasn't what it was. Your pants are on fire.
Most importantly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, Trump is a threat to this nation.
Now, the Republicans in a secret ballot in the Senate yesterday voted for South Dakota Senator John Thune to become the majority leader now that the Republicans will be in the majority in the United States Senate. And the Lizard King, Chuck Schumer, will be relegated to the ash heap of history, hopefully to never return to the public square. He won't go away. He'll be around forever. He's like, herpes. But never mind that. That's not important now. Thune has said he has said things in the past that were anti-Trump things, January 6th things. Now he's from South Dakota, where people are nice and normal and polite, and he's not from Queens. He probably doesn't have any friends who are from Queens. He's 63 years old. He's a super athlete of some kind. He's in super shape. And I got to tell you, the women yesterday at Newsmax were oohing and eyeing. Some were saying, he's like a Republican liberal, but they think that he's, a fancy man. And Thune was addressing the press yesterday, and he did say repeatedly that he would support the Trump agenda.
We are excited to reclaim the majority and to get to work with our colleagues in the House to enact President Trump's agenda. We have a mandate from the American people, a mandate not only to clean up the mess left by the Biden-Harris-Schumer agenda, but also to deliver on President Trump's priorities.
Well, hang on. President Trump's priorities and President Trump's agenda. That's pretty good.
And when it comes to choosing nominees who will pass Senate confirmation?
Well, as you know, the Senate has an advise and consent role under the Constitution, so we will do everything we can to process his noms quickly, get them installed in their position so they can begin to implement his agenda.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, look, he's a smart guy, serious guy. He's a South Dakota guy. He's what's that called? PX90 or whatever that workout regimen. That's what he's all about. The ladies, that bunch of women I was talking to yesterday, think he's a hottie. They do. He said negative things about President Trump. I'm looking forward to a collaborative effort with Republican control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. But let's keep our fingers crossed just in case.